So the joke is that we have a third part, but we're out of time. And the third part, I think, addresses that question because in the work that Yawo and I have done is imagining other ways of working, right? So the Caribbean is a place that is not known for nurturing. It has an extraordinarily traumatic history. A lot of violence. There's a slaughterhouse that literally sits below the soil of many bodies. And even though our governments are Black and Indian, it doesn't mean that they have shed the cloak of the colonial way of working. So, there are a lot of issues in terms of governance and leadership and structures and boards and committees and inefficiency and all of that. So we have both left the institution. I worked for the British Council, I left. We're both functioning independently and we're forming our own platforms. And those platforms are very consciously about nurturing. We are committed to the Caribbean. We have chosen to come back to and remain in the Caribbean. 1 or 2 generations before, if you're a creative person, you did not come back because there was no space for you. I think a lot about artists as orphans. And what we have tried to do is to create homes for people who feel that they have been abandoned, because even there's so much richness, there's so many people producing incredible work as musicians and artists and writers and filmmakers, but we don't have the infrastructure to house all of that. And so the work we've been doing through Fresh Milk and ARC, and if maybe this is an opportunity to just do it and just ring the bell when you need us to stop talking. But this is the commitment that we have, which is to working multi-generationally across all linguistic areas. So we work across the French, Spanish, Dutch, and English. The Colonial Project gave us a divided linguistic territory and made us think that we were separate, but we are not. And our work insists that we are a collective region. We have a lot that we share historically, and we insist on working across all linguistic divisions. So this is a map that Fresh Milk, an interactive map that Fresh Milk developed so that you could go in and you could look for educational institutions, museums, artist-led initiatives, and you could learn about the region. Because we've been mapped by other people for centuries. We're now mapping ourselves for ourselves so that we can understand how to move through our own space, and these resources are for us. So I think that the response to that is that you build your own spaces, you build your community, and I'm always being nurtured by people that come after me. I'm mentored by the people that come after me. So we think about multi-generational, we think about gender, we think about language, and we also engage with the diaspora to some extent.
Yes, Felipe, thank you so much. I feel that this kind of collaborative spirit to buffer and to create some protection from the institution's toxicity is really essential. Annalee and I have been working together for 11 years. And as such, we've built a sisterhood and, a sisterhood here, and then another kind of kindred family around the projects that we're doing, because this aspect of being an orphan, this aspect of being in a place that is anachronistic, oftentimes we think of the Caribbean as a space that's very much behind, but we want to argue for a different kind of creative capacity, a different kind of knowing. And we'll go through very briefly 3 projects. The first being a residency project that was started in 2012 in collaboration with Elvis Lopez from the Atelier 89 in Aruba, Fresh Milk and ARC. And this project really addresses the notion of us not knowing each other. So every year for about 3 to 4 weeks, we invite artists, curators, writers, etc., to come into the space to really get to know each other, to live together, to cook together, to be together, to integrate, to learn from each other. And this is a very, very fertile space for curiosity, exploring each other's culture as well. For some artists, it's going to be the first time that they've had an opportunity to leave their countries of origin. So this is a really, really big moment of encounter where they get to play, to integrate, to know the larger ecosystem while having the structure of support and care. One of the beautiful things about Caribbean, like it is a labor of love, and I think it's one of our favorite projects. We get to go in, we get to see and feel the energy of, these 3 weeks, because there's not a lot of time to make work. It's not a lot of time to deliver all aspects of self to the collective. But every time, every moment, at every end, there is such like joy, a feeling of like deep emancipation. And when they leave, they form kindred. Like we have the groups are still intact. They share, they go to each other's countries.
Yeah, I always say they come in as islands and they leave as an archipelago, right? Because many of these have never been to a country that speaks a different language, and they've maybe never been to another Caribbean country. They've been to New York or they've been to Miami, but opening up the Caribbean, it's like a whole new experience. So this is such a beautiful, and we all have WhatsApp group for every year, and they all hang out and they do projects together that just spin off. So it's kind of magic. Okay, this is the we're going fast, girl.
All right. So out of that kind of frustration, because Annalee and I are often like existing alone and or away from the people who feed us and keep us grounded, connected, and challenged. At sometime in 2014, we had this great idea to develop this gathering, and we called it Tilting Axis. It is a space informed from the Caribbean for the Caribbean. It is a space that gives us an understanding of what the industry is becoming. It's a space to explore affinities, kinship, and it's a space to like build and hold a certain kind of intelligence. The first session happened at Fresh Milk with around 28 people in 2015, and a small side note, when all of us congregated in the reading room at Fresh Milk, the beam of the building broke.
Yeah.
So not only is like this like weight, or like physical weight, but also like that historical weight too. The moment of encounter of us actually coming together, like finding funding, somebody or like people believed in this project enough to, create time and space in their agendas to find funding to come in to have these beautiful series of days. So we moved from Barbados in 2015 and we went to Miami at the Perez Art Museum in 2016, where we discussed Caribbean strategies. We moved from like a group of 20 something to a group of 80. So like scale was a really big factor there. It felt really generative, and it was very good to anchor our realities within that space, because Pam was also moving through a change. They had a new director. Franklin Sermons came on as the director of that space right after he did Prospect 3 in New Orleans. So he was having deep conversations and deep thinking about the Caribbean. So it felt like a very natural fit. In 2017, we were welcomed to the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands, where I think we became even bigger.
Yeah.
Jeez. There our topic was curating the Caribbean. So really working beyond the stereotype of our space, working to build potentially powerful partnerships with other institutions who were also thinking about the Caribbean. The Caribbean has become a little bit of a hot topic for institutions in the global north, and wanting to put up a kind of a value system to find that relationality that does not lead to further exploiting, parachuting, etc., was one of the primary concerns that we noted for this encounter.
And this was also about the archive. Miguel from Theoretica came to this. So we're very conscious with all of the work that we do, that we archive everything, and it's open source. All of the websites have all of the information. And I also want to say that one of the visions for Tilting Axis, the humble vision, is to tilt the axis of the world so that you look at the Caribbean, so that we become more visible. But that's done on our terms. And then we went to the Dominican Republic. We were in 2 cities, Santiago and Santo Domingo. And, you know, so it meant that we went from the English to the Spanish Caribbean, which was really important, and offering simultaneous translation so that, you know, we're really trying to be as inclusive as we possibly can. And this was looking at past, present, and future, what a Caribbean cultural ecology is based on. And there are a series of like plenaries and keynotes and pop-up presentations. So it's a very kind of rich and dynamic. And then the last one was in Guadeloupe.
Yes, where we had a really beautiful moment of encounter and intimacy through like the discussion around decolonization, because it became so trendy. Every kind of other word within the like art industry was revolving around decolonization, and we've been in the belly of this kind of like problem and in the belly of this essence and this energy for a very long time. And what I feel was really important about this encounter is that it was really grounded in like this spiritual awakening that everybody was having, coming into it being very exhausted about like being in institutions, but also like finding new strategies to think through what certain kinds of freedoms can mean, what certain kinds of temporality can kind of like how we can expand our notion of time, our notion of spirit, our notion of togetherness. This was really instructive as well, because the French Caribbean and Martinique, you know, we were being housed in a very particular location. We were being housed at the Memorial Act, which is one of the first institutions, or maybe the first institution dedicated to the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade in the Caribbean. So we were like grounded in a very ancestral space, grounded in an institution that I think understood the intention of what we were bringing forward.
And then we have a fellowship program. So we form relations with other institutions, the British Council, the University of Texas at Austin, Mother Tongue in Scotland, St. Andrew's College, to offer fellowships for Caribbean-based people. So really the focus is on the Caribbean and creating further professional development opportunities. There's no tertiary level degree for curatorial practice in the Caribbean. So we've been looking at curators. We have an incredible relationship with Het Nieuw Institute in Rotterdam, and the alliance includes the Stedelijk Amsterdam Museum, De Appel, and Constitute Melly. And this is a 6-month fellowship for a Caribbean-based practitioner to have the support. It comes with a generous purse, accommodation, and access to the resources of these 5 institutions. So Sean Leonard was the inaugural from Trinidad, Fernando and Aneta from Cuba, and we've just selected the black and white photo Israel map from Barbados will be going in February of next year. And then we're just gonna whiz through Sourgrass.
So I was healing from institutional trauma, and of course, when I'm doing this, I'm oftentimes either at Annalee's table or a couch. It's like I've been like recuperating at Fresh Milk for a long time. So, you know, naturally, as things were ending, you know, other seeds were beginning to germinate, and at that table, we had this discussion about our next move, because Tilting Axis felt, especially like emerging, like COVID was just emerging. We knew that we had to change our working relationship because of this funding structure. We weren't nimble. Tilting Axis is not a nimble project. We really need a host, and that host needs to give. So Sour Grass, we really took inspiration from my island and from Barbados, and thought through the resistant qualities of this grass, of the fact that even though sometimes we have such hostile terrain, whether it be the soil and or the institution, this thing is so prolific. It's so instructive in terms of its negotiation and will to live. So it was something that became, I think, in essence, a different kind of energy for Annalee and I to move into. We really wanted to create something intimate, something that could nurture us. Well, because we haven't been doing that. We haven't been doing that incredibly well in terms of thinking about creating something that would, you know, give back in multiple ways to us. So Sourgrass became this like meditation. And here we like put up some of our manifesto points.
Thinking about slow cultural work.
Yeah.
And, undergrowth. These are things that we've been thinking about for a few years. How can we work more slowly, more meaningfully, have longer term partnerships with people that we respect and care about, because then the work is so much more fun and it's much more efficient. I'm thinking about building new ways of working, sustenance, cherishing the mundane, upholding traditions.
Yeah. And through this, we started to have a conversation with Sophia from Kunstituut Melli, and she was really interested in the work that we were doing separately and collaboratively. And we were able to form a multi-year collaboration with Melli, where each year we bring a Caribbean artist who's never had the opportunity to exhibit his or her work in Europe to the institution. And last year we supported Jamaican-born, Trinidad-based Jasmine Thomas-Gervin in a show titled Bathed in Sacred Fire. This collaboration was really, I think, beautiful, instructive, and it continues to give Annalee and I an understanding of how we want to work with institutions, what is our like mediation, what are our value systems, because we don't want to continuously deplete ourselves, and we want to give the artists that we're working with an understanding of what that healthy support feels like in like real intangible ways. They get a commission. We go to Rotterdam for 2 weeks. We try to embed as much into the space. We work with partners. And this garden is the garden at Zwart Piet. And Yuri, you developed some of this garden in collaboration with the students. Yeah, and it was a big anchoring space for Annalee, Jasmine, and I when we went in terms of like thinking about how we develop a holding space to anchor the exhibition, all of its programming, and our intentionality.
Yeah, and this is, we had a wonderful gathering there. The students served food and teas made with things from the garden. We then had a session with Jasmine speaking with Olive Senior, who's Jamaica's poet laureate and has done a lot of beautiful writing and poetry that they've both kind of fed off of each other in really nourishing ways. So this was laying a table for the ancestors to activate the exhibition. And our next artist is from Puerto Rico. Her name is Beatriz Santiago Munoz. She's working with film and installation, so a very different kind of exhibition. It opens on the 9th of September. You're all welcome to come to the opening. And this is the last slide with a still from one of her main pieces that will form the base of the exhibition. And we are done. God, y'all have been great.
Yeah, thank you.
That last photo, is that still from a film? Oh, yes. Okay, I just wondered if it's still it's called The Raven, The Trench, and The Mare.
Yeah, great to see you. Last time I wasn't. No, you weren't there. Yeah.
So because we're already 20 minutes over time and we really also need a break. I would say just one more question and then all the other questions, because there aren't any questions in the chat and we're all together. We're going to be together a couple of days more and we can then continue our conversation informally over lunch. So yeah, I would say last question and then.
So I'm dyslexic, so I'll try not to meander too much. I wrote it. As an ex-Israeli, I have a complex relation, if not resentment, to grass lawn. That was important to Palestine by the British and still is a major landscape element. And I have even more complex or hateful relationship to pine trees that are covered hundreds of destroyed Palestinian villages. Now, my question before Annalee started your presentation was how you can even live in colonized landscape. And I think you show some amazing examples of that. Now the meandering starting. In the past few years, we have a lot of talks about invasive species. It's an important part of ecological thinking, and there's a lot of opinions about what you do with invasive species, which are also not a result of colonialism, but definitely capitalism and the destruction of this planet. I would like to know what you think about invasive species in terms of your practice, and how it might inform institutional, curatorial, or artistic practices. Thank you.
Sorry. Sugarcane is the biggest invasive species in our context. I was thinking a little bit about this in Catalonia, because when I was there, there was that horrendous incident that happened between, there were people trying to come into Spain through the island, and there was this horrific incident at the border with Border Patrol police beating people. And then they were hosting the NATO summit in Madrid, and there are all of these discussions around what's happening with the war in Ukraine. And then I was doing the drawings of these plants, and someone said, well, why are you not only doing the local plants? And, this Japanese tree is an invasive species. And I guess it's about learning to live with, nowhere is just the original plant. I mean, we've lost almost the entire biodiversity in Barbados. There's one small forest called Turner's Hall Wood, which has, looks like what Barbados would have looked like in the early 17th century. I mean, the invasive species is the colonial project. And I think that we're so traumatized by that what we're feeling now, like this, the tilting axis that happened in Guadeloupe when Yawo was talking about this resurgence of the spirit. I feel like in the Black Lives Matter movement, even though things feel very polarized, I also feel that there have been spaces that have opened up for more nuanced conversations. And in Barbados, we have had more conversations around race, and I think kind of honest ways than we've had for forever, and trying to reconcile what, the thing about colonization is that it's really given us a sense of legitimacy and illegitimacy, who belongs and who doesn't, systems of hierarchy, and I think that we have to figure out how to deal with those more complex, nuanced histories. And I guess the plant world, this is what Michael Marder was speaking about yesterday, becoming more plant-like is a way to learn how to do that. That feels like a very inarticulate response to your question. I'd like to think about it a bit more, but thank you for asking it.
There's some suggestions through remediation that offer me a way to think through the ways in which plant life, vegetal life, the ways in which the alive world seeks to create its own balance. And even though at times our actions are hostile, violent, and we live with this history of violence, there is remediation happening always. Not sure if that addresses it, but the remediation helps to give me some sense of what might be possible.
And maybe reparation, which is the conversation that's happening, that the Caribbean is leading in the British Houses of Parliament. I think that actually is really kind of peaking at the moment. And so we can speak about that more, but there is a 10-point plan out of CARICOM, this Caribbean community, to address the global north and to speak about reparation in terms of the ecology of history. So I think this is one way of dealing with the invasion of the colonial project.
Okay, everyone. So there are a lot of thanks from the chat too. So a lot of people saying thanks for the beautiful talks. And yeah, also, yeah, let's say thanks to you here.